For those of you who are new to TLA, the TLA network is a gathering place for people who change the world with words. We use the written, spoken, and sung word for personal and community transformation. This can take many different forms, from writing stories to poetry, memoir, and more. Everyone who reads today is a member of the TLA network. Today, I also want to acknowledge that while words hold the power to heal, they also have the power to harm. I have personally felt overwhelmed and disconnected in the past few months with the relentless news cycle. For me, taking a break, being mindful of what I consume, and doing reflective writing has not been an escape, but a way of locating myself in the world. By grounding ourselves first and sharing our stories with others, I know that we can affect change. Whatever you're bringing in today, I want to welcome you in here and thank you for sharing your time with us. On our upcoming classes page, you can register for change-making offerings such as Foundations of Facilitation, which I am co-teaching, embodied storytelling through song, Telling It Slant, the art of autofiction, or Unmasking Divergence, finding compassion through therapeutic writing. If you're ready to share your own change-making work with the TLAN community and the world at large, TLAN is currently accepting proposals for the 2025 Power of Words Conference and for classes and workshops throughout the year. A few housekeeping notes. There is no tolerance for hate speech, harassment, or bullying. This event is being recorded and will be distributed publicly, so please keep your mics muted during the presentation part of the program. However, please engage with the artists and community through the chat box. We will be collecting questions throughout the program for the talkback with the artists after the performance. For the best viewing experience, please set your view on the upper right-hand corner if you're on your computer. Set your view to speaker. Thank you so much, and please enjoy the TLAN virtual salon. Welcome. First up is Alec Esparza. Alec is an altarista and storyteller. He works in collaboration with families, schools, and community partners and Department of Corrections throughout California. Alec utilizes the folk arts of storytelling, altar making, ofrendas, creative writing, experiential critical thinking activities, and adventure learning. His approach embraces creating sacred space for community building, social transformation, and healing. Participants in Alec's work engage in a process of becoming more responsive and responsible members of the community. His goal is to deepen and broaden personal life skills to face life challenges in the world we touch, and to walk in beauty with greater strength, understanding, and wisdom. You can keep up with Alec at ozocommunity.com. Welcome, Alec. Please unmute.
Hello. Can you all hear me? Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that, Amanda. Yeah, it is good to be here. It's a Navajo term. My name is Alec, and I go by Arza Dancing Bear. I welcome your awareness and presence in this space and time and invite you to be like the sacred power of water, ready to flow in whatever direction that it presents itself. I'll be sharing today's story entitled Crossing the Road. One day, an indigenous healer known as Travel Man was on a journey with his friend and his family to New Mexico from Florida. Halfway through their journey, they met a fierce rainstorm. As they traveled, a hazy mist formed created by the heavy rainfall. They could not see more than a few feet through the windshield and could barely see the headlight beams in the hazy mist. As they drove cautiously through the storm, the travel man asked his friend on 3 separate occasions to stop the truck. He could feel they were running over something on the road. On the first stop, travelmen exited the truck. The passengers could see the healer's silhouette in the hazy mist through the windshield as he held something close to his chest. Soon after, he re-entered the truck, drenched from rain, and instructed his friend to continue their journey. On the second stop, Dad exited the truck to see what Travelman was doing. And he asked, "Amigo, what are you doing?" Healer replied, "I am safely removing toads from the road." And Dad asked, "But why? Aren't they just toads?" Travelman replied, "Yes, my friend, they are just toads, but they are much like us. They are our relatives. And as we have somewhere to go, so do the toads." Dad pondered the thought for a moment, then began helping Healer to safely remove toads off the road. On the third stop, Dad's family exited the truck and asked, "Dad, what are you doing?" He simply replied, "Well, I'm helping my friend to safely remove toads off the road." Then his son asks, "But why? Aren't they just toads?" "Yes, my son, this is true. They are just toads, but they are much like us. They are our relatives, and they too have somewhere to go." Just then, the family began to help their dad and travel men to safely remove toads off the road. A brief time after, there were not any toads left on the road. They loaded back onto the truck and continued their journey. Certainly, there may be times when we feel like toads, afraid to cross the road because of the beam of lights bearing down on us in a hazy mist. At times, we may feel fearless crossing the road without thinking about the consequences of being run over by the unknown beam of lights. Too often, we may act like Dad, so focused on driving through the hazy mist, not realizing that we may be running over something, not mindful of others who may need help. Thus, perhaps a personal challenge may be to respond more like Travelman, prepared to stop and help others struggling to cross the road in a safe, caring manner. Nonetheless, it is fundamental to be as consistently aware and present in our journeys, mindful that we all have somewhere to go. Gracias. Continued blessings and success in your beauty walk. May you discover joy, experience happiness, acquire steadfast confidence, and find peace. Ya'ete. It is good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alec, as always. Beautiful storytelling and beautiful story. Next up, we have my friend, Mike Alvarez. MF Alvarez is Assistant Professor of Communication at the University of New Hampshire. He is the author of The Paradox of Suicide and Creativity and Unraveling an Autoethnography of Suicide and Renewal. for which he won the 2024 Qualitative Book Award from the International Congress of Qualitative Inquiry. He is also the recipient of an Early Career Award from the International Association of Autoethnography and Narrative Inquiry. Keep up with Mike at mfalvarez.net. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, everyone. Well, first, I want to say thank you to Alec for that beautiful writing. Thank you so much for that. Thank you also to Amanda and Tracy for the organizing and hosting, and to Ashley for the gorgeous presenter cards, and also to TLAN and to everyone who is present here with us. So before I begin, I just wanted to bring up something that Ashley wrote in the chat. She wrote of the sacredness of grief and growth, which is so fitting because those are things that the piece that I am about to read uh, addresses. So this piece, it's titled "A Love Letter to Grandma Lile." It's in some ways an outgrowth of my attempts to use personal narrative as a means of engaging and maintaining continuing bonds with departed loved ones. It's written in an epistolary style, addressing my dear grandmother who died 20 years ago in the second person. So, with that said, let's begin. A love letter to Grandma Lile. It was spring when I first met you. I was 10 years old, not yet too big for laps, so you plopped me down on yours. You asked me if I liked E.T., and I said he looked like Pooh, so you laughed. You knew me when I was a baby, your youngest daughter's youngest son. You held me and sang songs to me until I drifted to sleep, or watched in amusement as I licked sweat off your arms. I always did like salt. But I didn't remember you, because for 10 years I lived in the Philippines and you lived in New Jersey. I knew you only through stories and old photos. And when the day came for us to live together, I didn't recognize your face. I thought you were a nanny until mother told me otherwise. For 8 years, you pulled me aside to watch daytime soaps. All My Children, One Life to Live, General Hospital. And for 8 years, you told me many stories of your childhood, mother's childhood, provincial life in the Philippines, the Japanese occupation during World War II, and raising 8 children during the wartime and post-war years. Stories that I took for granted because you were still living. Stories that I now hold close. Gradually, my body outgrew your lap. You marked every occasion, birthdays, holidays, graduations, poetry contests won, by rolling a $20 bill like a joint and discreetly slipping it into my hands or pockets, as if people didn't know you gave your grandkids money. The more I grew, the less time we spent, and the more promises I made that I couldn't keep. I never did take you out for a stroll around the block, and we never did eat Neapolitan ice cream on a cone from the Mr. Softy truck. I was too busy being a bored teenager, and all the while, you were silently approaching death. Dementia came suddenly and swiftly. Sparing no one of its unkindness, it was especially unkind to you. It made the world frightening to you, and you frightening to me. No longer did you greet dawn with a contemplative smile. You spoke of snakes coiled around electric fans, mice carrying plagues, shadowy persecutors unseen, children eating mud. Your world grew so dim that you sought refuge in the cold darkness of the garage, each disappearing act sending us into a frenzied search until one of us found you while you muttered, "They're coming for me." I begrudged the days I had to come home right after school to look after you, to give you sponge baths after you had soiled yourself, to squeeze fecal matter off your clothes with my bare hands, to dress you in fresh clothing from mother's dresser. But those begrudged days taught me the physicality of love, especially when words lose their potency and intelligibility. Bodies, as I would come to learn from you, deserve dignity and respect, especially as they near the end of life. When the ambulance took you on a stretcher, I naively thought you would come back. I naively thought you would not die. On the day of your death, I watched the green line on the monitor flatten, but because your chest continued to rise and fall, I waited for your fingers to twitch, for you to hear the rustling of my clothes as I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. You will wake any moment now, I thought to myself. You will put on the black wig that's resting on the styrofoam head and slip your sinewy arms into the brown cardigan sweater that you never took off. You will smile a toothless smile, eyes twinkling behind spectacles, and greet the afternoon sun with the sweet song you always sang. But the doctor unplugged the respirator. The nurse drew the blinds closed. Your chest stopped moving. Dead, the doctor said. Organ failure. No one will ever truly escape loving, losing, and suffering. But eventually, feelings of grief join together with joyful memories and loving feelings. Nearly 2 decades have passed since the day of your passing. I have ceased being a teenager, but you never ceased being a presence in my life. I wear a cardigan sweater like the one you always wore, and reminisce about you with the other people you brought into this world. And when I find myself visiting our old family home in New Jersey, I wake in time to see the sun rise, the same sun you greeted daily. Standing where you once stood, I see the contours of your face on clouds. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Michele Hampton. Michelle's career has focused on supporting people find wellness and health in their daily lives. As an avid camper and traveler, Michele embraces new cultures and the self-care that nature brings. Falling into deep grief with the untimely death of her mom, Michele had to stop and look at her life. This grief journey helped to redefine what's important in life and embrace small moments. Michele lives in Calgary, Canada, with her husband, kids, and herd of pets. You can keep up with Michele at openingdoorsoccupationaltherapy.com. Welcome, Michele. Please unmute.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay, good. My teenage children are home today, so I've given them rules to stay off the internet right now, not to shake anything up. So thank you, Alec and Mike, for getting started. Mike, sounds like you and I have stories about our grief journeys today and loss of someone important in our life. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's pretty raw. Thanks, Amanda, for the lovely introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to do a monologue today. It's called Proof of Life. Let's get started. Hampton, what are we going to do with the cats? That's my husband, Steve, always trying to fix things. I'm not ready to go there yet. I just got the call. Dead. Life as I've known it is over. Mom is a force to be reckoned with. She was a nurse in Drumheller. Need I say more? How can she be dead? I'm going to have to decide what to do about the cats and everything else. What do I know about estates, lawyers, Mom's wishes? Would she trust me to do this? Do I trust me? Fuck Hampton, just get it done. You're a trained therapist, for God's sakes, you can handle this. I'm already thinking about the eulogy. Wills, death certificates, proof of life, proof of death, proof of who I am in all of this. The sold sign is up. Packing my mom's house is painful. Why so much stuff? Mom loved this antique stained glass window. Keep, sell, donate. The antique dealer in Inglewood tells me, I'll give you $40 for the piece. Well, normally I take the first offer, but I've done my research and I know it's worth at least 5 times that. I say, we both know what this is worth. I'll take $150. You'll still make a nice profit. At the lawyers, I speak up about what's fair. I don't let them overcharge the estate. Finally, I'm owning my voice and my confidence. Then I hear my mother's voice. Michele, don't be so fucking full of yourself. Wait, I've been shutting up and not being full of myself my whole life. No more doubting, no more second guessing myself. It's time for me to speak up and own who I am. I started reaching out for support and sharing my story. I don't have to do this alone. This is Mom's home turf. People love her and they know me. They will help. Muriel was something. I can't believe she's gone. I'm so sorry. I'll stop by to give you a hand. We'll have a glass of wine on her deck. She sure loved her deck. I miss her. My alone doesn't feel so big anymore. Going through Mom's closets, oh, the Joseph Ripkoff outfits. Every hanger was full. Sleek, colorful abstracts. Classic black and white geometric prints. Modern asymmetric blazers. And her drawers. Oof, my mom loved her expensive underwear. I can hear her voice. Michele, those are good underwear. You can wear those. Not the bras. Your boobs are too big. Missy, Mom's old cat, she moved in with us. I became her person. Missy and I probably miss my mom the most. We would sit together in her favorite vintage brocade chair in my living room. She purred. I remembered. Mom, I can smell you when I wear your pearls. That Joseph Ripkoff dress with the gold zipper fits me like a glove. I wore it to the murder mystery with Steve the other night and everyone loved it. You'd be proud of the prices that I'm getting for those antiques. Who knew that I could find my voice in this space of deep grief? You and Dad knew I could do it. I hear your voices. I feel you in my soul. We got you, sis. I'm doing okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michele. That was beautiful. I quoted you back to you in the chat. It's gorgeous. Next up, we have Polly Alice. Polly Alice McCann is a Kansas City artist, book designer, and poet with her MFA in writing from Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. She is the author of 5 poetry collections, the editor of 4 international poetry anthologies, and over 25 other titles, including a short fiction anthology that won Top 100 Books of 2021 by Kirkus Review. She says her favorite thing is to tell stories, maybe yours. Keep up with Polly at pollymccann.com. Welcome, Polly.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. It's so good to hear all these stories and see these faces and get to know you a little bit. When it said virtual salon, I pictured a salon I went to in person once that had, beautiful antique furniture, and we met in a sort of the warehouse district, but they had turned this room in a warehouse into this beautiful living room. So that's where I imagine we're kind of meeting online today. Well, I brought some poems to read for you, and they were all made thanks to a little grant I had to go to a writer's residency for a week. And it's kind of neat to me how our words kind of do this. We kind of start out with just something like a few scribbles in our notebook. I had a few scribbles. And then I was at the TLAN conference in Kansas City, and I think it was September. And they said, why don't you get up and read a poem for the open mic? So I read a poem I had called A Secret Love for Hearts. And then amazingly enough, I got to spend a week making a whole book about, and I had to go and find all these stories about hearts and figure out why heart was an important word to me. And so, I don't know, it was just really fun. So I thought I'd share some of those with you today, and just about 4 poems. So the first one's called Secret Love for Hearts. You know, they say, don't use your heart in a poem. It's so overdone, a misnomer, really. You don't really mean your heart, that thing that beats in your chest, unhandsomely, shaped like an ugly fist, or a fruit hooked by veins and hideous pink colors. That thing that's pumping, not a poetic action. That thing that may or may not be on the left side of your chest, protected by that rather bony prison of questionable beauty, and with your confusing mythical qualities, the ribs. They say don't use your heart in a poem because it's referring to a nebulous space, a space between soul and psyche, between memory and spirit. If not you, who can truly identify how many invisible parts we humans might be made of and where our invisible centers may or may not be? Are they tied to a motley-looking organ, one that beats rather incessantly, loudly? It can get plaque or tears or jump-started by electric shocks? No, there's none of that heart stuff here. It's not pretty, so don't mention hearts. Find a way to talk about feelings without meaning that pretend place we say feelings are from. You could use body parts, bones, even blood, but hearts? Nah. Those are too cute for the raw work of poetry, the pounding and fizz that must go on here, so everyone takes us poets seriously. We cannot be thought of as sissies or ninnies, or like St. Valentine changed the meaning of hearts forever. One Friday in February, I created my very first Pinterest board of everything beautiful, handmade. When my little 6-year-old girl with flyaway hair peered over my keyboard, and she said in her butterfly soft voice, "Mama, I think you have a secret love for hearts." Thanks. So that's the first one. So that's kind of how this got started, and I started thinking about hearts, and I realized there were hearts everywhere in my life, and that I had become totally infatuated with them and had never known it. So the other one I want to read is called The Heart Lady. And all these stories are true, very true, just slightly maybe artistically changed a little, but very true. Okay, The Heart Lady. I love the Heart Lady. She keeps her hearts fresh, spray paints them under bridges before the first light. The city comes round and paints over them in gray, but the Heart Lady keeps her heart fresh. There must be hundreds of layers by now. Free-handed hearts, sometimes magenta or even purple. When she runs out of pink, I think, maybe she's left-handed. When I swing through the overpass, I take the exit to Highway 635 into Kansas, where I grew up. I'm welcomed with a heart. How does she cover the entire city? What must be every night? Because it's not just that one. It's everywhere. Down by I-70 and over on the east side, even the Broadway Bridge. No matter where I go, the Heart Lady's watching out for me. I think she must pray for our safe travels. She must sleep under the stars, sometimes running across lanes of highway, skipping out from behind silver cop cars to tell us there's still love in this world. There's still angels. And sometimes we must run out in the face of all that we cannot see to mark a path for those who pass by. Thanks. All right, so that's the second one. And that really happened. There's hearts everywhere in Kansas City, and I don't know how that lady did it. So when I went on my writer's retreat, I went to the Writer's Place of Derry It's called The Writers' Colony at Dairy Hollow in Eureka Springs. Has anyone else ever been there? Okay, well, I really enjoyed it, and I'd never been to Arkansas before. And it's one of the only places they told me that it's the only place in America that has a writer's colony where you can write a cookbook and there's a commercial kitchen you can stay in. So that made me want to write a cookbook, but I stayed in one of the poetry suites and wrote poetry. And this was the poem I wrote there that was brand new. And going back to my very first memory of hearts, it's called Emily's Heart. And all the poems in this book are labeled with a year. So this is 1978, the year I was born. And it's a true story of when I was born. During a blizzard in the farthest north, I decided to be born early. I didn't know it was a risky thing to do. She'll be blind, said the doctor. She'll be deaf, said the nurse. Her little heart might not make it, said the lady with the alligator purse. My mother said, Jesus loves this baby. She'll be fine. Nobody could argue. Lawsy mercy, Lord o' heavens, said my grandmother, and wrung her hands. My grandfather poured 3 fingers of whiskey. My great-grandfather lit a corncob pipe. And then my Grandma Ray said, oh dear, well now, don't worry. And she grabbed my aunt and my uncle and my cousins and put them all in a van to drive through the snow to come and meet me. My father called in a ship full of preachers and they prayed hard all night. And when I was born, I was fairy-sized, smaller than a wish. My mother had to take dresses from her Betsy doll to fit me. The nurses had to keep me in a glass box for months so I could grow larger than a slipper. While she waited to hold me, my mother sewed a doll named Emily. She had black button eyes, a tiny round nose, reddish-brown hair made of yarn, and a little smile. Oh, and a lavender dress. Best of all, when you peeked behind her collar, there was a little red heart on her chest, exactly where a doll's heart should be. And it was perfect size and shade of red. It held all the love a mother could fit into a heart as small and new as mine. When I was big enough to play with Emily, somehow I knew that secret heart was my mother's love just for me. Okay, do we have time for one more? Do you want one more?
Do one more, yes.
Did I do 4? Okay. I have it all written out, but then when I start reading, I lose track. Okay. So there's a lot of other juicy ones in here, but I'm just going to read a nice little ending one. I think this was the one. Okay. I know people in my family like to play cards. That's the one thing we do during family time. So this one's called Poet Takes All the Hearts. Sometimes you look around and the world seems dark, doesn't it? The barista scowls at you and stares indifferently, hands you a coffee that's only meh. The waitress brings you cold bread when you were wishing for toast. The politicians declared you illegal. The boss is either firing you or paying you a non-living wage. And your family hasn't spoken to you in years. Your friend takes a vacation and you're in line for food stamps. Sometimes it's like the world is ready to turn black and white. Color is something you only dreamt about, and no one can quite recollect rainbows anymore. But that's when you remember. You're a poet, and aren't poets the ones who seem to have all the hearts? Poets cry for all the dogs, no matter how mangy. Poets bottle feed lost kittens. Poets teach birds to talk. Poets scour beaches for treasures, no matter how small. And poets march with flags and made up rhymes they think will cause the scales to fall from the eyes of the rich. Poets paint riddles from pure ire, and they dance while waiting for their first fair wages they've ever had. So let's throw a party. You put up the card table. Uncle Jim can get out his cigars and pour us something deep and red. Mom can shuffle. I'll be the dealer and set up the game. The kids can make popcorn, and my brothers will play the tunes. My sister will come from out of town. The cousins will drop in. What a surprise when we all get dealt a new hand. Let's bid on hearts this time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Polly. And everybody, I dropped the link to Polly's collection in the chat. So if you love it, then please support her. If there's a better link, please feel free to drop that, Polly.
That one's fine.
Lastly, we have Jane Hseu. Jane Hseu is a professor of English at Dominican University, board member of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, and core organizer for Banyan, Asian American Writers Collective. She has published personal essays and poetry and is currently at work on a memoir about a family history of mental illness. At Dominican, she teaches racial minority U.S. literatures and writing creative nonfiction. She regularly presents and facilitates at venues such as the Apida Arts Festival, Ada Cheng's Pour One Out Storytelling Series, American Writers Festival, and Casa de las Americas, Cuba, in order to build community and encourage storytelling for social change. Keep up with Jane at janehseu.com/about. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Thank you to Amanda and Ashley for organizing, and all the people at TLAN. Thank you to all the tellers and speakers. So wonderful to listen to you all and share with you all today. Thanks for everyone for being here. Thanks especially to my wonderful family and friends who are, here today. And you might even hear yourself in what I read today. Surprise! I don't even know if I told you. Okay, so I'll be sharing two pieces today. One will be a song that I've written. I was hoping to play my guitar with the song, but I could not figure out the Zoom audio settings, so maybe next time. And the second one is so I'm going to sing the song a cappella, and then the second one is a prose poem. Okay, so this song is called Home Away from Home. I have traveled far from home. I have traveled so far from home. Rarely had a guide for how to go. So many times I traveled alone. I have traveled far from home. I have traveled so far from home, inside and out, side of my soul, trying on and off, oh, so many roads. There comes a time the isolation gets too much to bear, being all alone. When we need to choose our familiar, someone to walk with home. I have traveled far from home. I have traveled so far from home to find a home for myself, away from home, far away from home. I'm no longer alone, home away from home. Thank you. And this is a poem, I think, prose poem. Okay, it's called Memory Foam Pillows. My pillow is flat, with barely discernible alternating shiny and non-shiny stripes, a spot of dried blood from a decades-old nosebleed. Inherited from my parents' home, which I left at 18, through college, the decade of grad school, from LA to Chicago. The best pillows are the ones you've slept on forever, flattened by your head and body. Those are the most comfortable and familiar. Our pillows, not like those fluffy new ones. You accidentally used my pillow, I accuse my husband. His lies next to mine on the bed, brown with age. 1970s patterned yellow flowers with brief brown stems. Google tells me you should change your pillow every 2 years. My father says we spend a third of our life sleeping, so make sure you have a good bed. He didn't say, get a good pillow. My mother swears by her newfangled memory foam pillow, the regular cotton pillowcase hanging off the odd rectangular flat box. One day, I noticed my pillow's polyester fibers, already spread thin, whispery across decades of use, have separated to leave a hole in the center. My head lies only on fabric touching sheet fabric with no pillowing in between. My head, neck, and back ache when I awake, especially my left shoulder on which I curl in a fetal sleeping position. My headaches last most of the day and don't improve with repetitive 4-hour doses of Advil and Tylenol, alternating because one brand might not work. Google tells me side sleepers shouldn't sleep on flat pillows. They need higher, fluffier pillows to keep the head and fragile neck muscles aligned. The flat polyester pillow somehow works for the regular bed, but when I sleep on the futon in my 4-year-old daughter's room, the fluffier pillow works better. Still, I wake up with a stiff neck and back, which I could tolerate, but for the persistent headache. My husband says there's probably a lot of factors to get a good night's not painful sleep for 8 hours, body in a position you're not aware of, unconscious. I researched best pillows online. Some are $100, so no thanks. I bought the 2 guest pillows hastily at Target, 2 fluffy ones. A good deal. One seems a little less fluffy than the other. Does it make a difference when I'm trying to sleep on them? Not really. I hold off on buying a new pillow until I have a cold, scared of not sleeping well so I can't work, popping up anxious in the early morning. First thing, I go on Amazon and search autocomplete Best Pillow Side Sleeper. No neck pain. There are 2 cheapest ones. I choose the one about which users don't complain about the smell. The pillow arrives compressed and needs to slowly expand. The first night there is some smell, and I'm worried I can't sleep, but I do. I also sleep a little bit with the new pillow during my nap with the daughter the next day. By the second night, the pillow doesn't smell anymore. I love my pillow, I tell my husband and daughter. New memory foam pillow? Where have you been all my life? Daughter lies down and puts her head on my pillow, which is almost as big as she is. Mommy loves her pillow, she tells her father, grinning widely. Since I live with bipolar disorder, good sleep is crucial. I need my mind rested and strong to ward off the depression and anxiety. When I get fewer than 7 hours of sleep, I am tired and grumpy all day. That happens exacerbated by spring forward and daylight savings time and all our time changes. But with my memory foam pillow, I am not as tired. My nap that day leaves me more rested than before. Can a pillow change one's sense of being? Thank you. And yeah, that was a lot about a pillow. I wrote that a few years ago. Wow, it's really detailed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. And thank you to all the performers. Please, participants, audience, unmute. Give everybody a round of applause. Thank you. Awesome. I'm going to switch into gallery mode for the yes, for this portion of the performance for the talkback. So Thank you all. I mean, it's lovely because sometimes we don't always know what everyone is going to be presenting. And so to be able to see people's connections in the moment is really lovely. And so I wanted to speak to one connection first. I mean, we'll start off strong, I guess. That of grief, because that was a potent thing from the very beginning today. And so this can be for anyone, but of course, especially for Mike and for Michele. And Michele wrote and read a line that said, "Who knew I could find my voice in this space of deep grief?" which I absolutely love. And I was wondering for you two writers, Mike and Michele, how does writing or telling stories of your ancestors transform your relationship to them?
I guess I can speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right, sure. I think when I mean, I've written my grandmother before in my latest book, Unraveling. But bits and pieces, and I think that in some ways, writing about ancestors and other departed loved ones helps me. It allows me to sit with the pain in a way, but it also allows me to excavate memories that I had forgotten. And I think um, earlier when I mentioned using personal narrative as a form of continuing bonds, and I really like the idea that um, just because someone is gone, that it doesn't mean that our relationship with them is terminated. Death ends a life, death doesn't end terminate a relationship. And whenever I engage, for example, conversations about people I have lost, such as my grandmother, with others who knew them, it's always amazes me to find new things I didn't know. It's that my understanding of them and by extension, my relationship with them is constantly evolving as I get to know these little slivers of um, things that only now, decades later, I'm coming to know. So in some ways, writing, and I will say writing is a very dialogic process. I write, of course, through the things that I recollect, but I also write in dialogue and or as a result of the dialogue I've had with people who also miss my grandmother and these things, there's always new stories that are constructed around people who are gone, even though there were, no, they're, we're not able to spend time with them anymore, but it doesn't mean that the stories end there. So that's I want to leave there, and I know Michele has um I'm sure has a lot to say as well.
Thanks, Mike. I think my story helped me process with my grief journey. Um, Within it, there's some funny parts of it as well too, and I think that oftentimes within grief, everything is pretty heavy and dark. And so, and my mom was a pretty funny person, so it kind of reminded me. That I could put that on the table. And the first time people would heard me with my monologue were like, "Oh my God, that's your mother," because she was French Canadian, so I haven't lost her voice, because when people die, we lose their voices, right? Oftentimes. And so I think it helps me share that, and every time I say it, there's different parts of it that sort of stand out for me, even though I can memorize the thing. But I think grief in our culture, and I'm talking Canadian, but I think we can look at this from a North American culture, something that people hide a lot. And I think by sharing our grief journeys and our grief stories, um, it allows people to to take it out of the dark spaces of their life. And so after they've heard my monologue, I've had lots of people come and talk to me about it and thank me for sharing my journey. So thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Michelle and Mike. Does anyone have, Grace, did you want to ask this question out loud, or I can read it? I saw you drop.
Oh, okay, sure. Hi there. I just wanted to thank you all for sharing. I was especially moved by the stories and the songs about family and grief. Specifically for Michelle's work, I was just wondering whether she knows of Roz Chat's books on grief. She's a famous cartoonist, and I find her work to be very funny and like smart. So I think that she might want to check that out. So special hi from the Jersey Shore, and a special shout out to Jane, who is a virtual friend that I met, I think 2 years ago or so. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Grace. I dropped the link to Roz Chast's books in the chat. It looks, her work looks lovely. Alec, I know the story that you told us today. Like, I know the background of that story, and you're welcome. Like, I would love for you to share that with everybody. But I'm also curious, in light of what we're talking about with grief, like how we can transition into the light. Like, because I feel like your story could relate to that as well.
Yes, there are a number of connections with especially with the use of the spirit of the animal and how we connect with animals in many different ways. What I feel is that earlier, I'm not sure, but I think it was Mike who mentioned something about never forgetting or remembering. You know, our ancestors, whether the recent passing or many years ago, their gift to us was their story. And the more we share it, we will never forget. I don't know how many times, like in family, where we get together, and just my youngest grandson was visited here not too long ago. And I think it was one of my daughters says, we call him Boy because that's what they called my dad. So that's his nickname now. Says, Boy, wow, that was just like your grandpa. What? And then we have a conversation about it. So there's always remembrances or opportunities to have a conversation about someone who's gone physically. And the thing that sticks with me the most when we talk about this is my great-great-grandmother shared it with my grandmother shared it with my mother shared it with us, and I'm sharing it with my grandkids. You know, we were told that we go through a process of 3 deaths. The first is when we're physically gone, the last breath. And the second is when we are buried, never to be seen again on the face of the earth. And the third and most tragic would be to be forgotten. So the storytelling, the recollections, the things we observe, see, start that conversation, and they never end. Let's talk about that next time. Oh, it's that way. Now, when I work with incarcerated men and women, this is the story I shared today is the going away story, because we're not going to see each other again, most likely. And there'll be something like, what gives you most grief? They're not talking about death, but as a son, a father, an uncle, an aunt, a grandmother, the emotional death they experience because they're incarcerated for so long, and the anxiety of getting back into society. And all the individuals I work with, they're minimum 25 years to life that they have been serving, and all of them have been at least 25 and more. So it's like going through a process of a rebirth, so to speak, emotionally, psychologically. And and then when they start talking about their stories, and the story like I shared is, oh, that reminds me of something my dad said. Oh, I remember my grandmother sharing something like that. We all have somewhere to go. You may feel stuck right now, but the door's going to open in a few months or a few weeks. Are you prepared? Are you prepared to go where you want and need to go? So those are the kind of connections I find when storytelling.
Thank you so much, Alec. Jane, I was curious when Alec was talking, I was curious because we're talking about, like Alec was talking about transitions and, trying to find your place. And that made me think of your song, of course, Far From Home. Can you talk a little bit about the process behind writing that song and like how it transformed you?
Sure. Thanks. Well, my friend Eduardo Eusebio, I think, is still on the call. His picture is there. We have a wonderful Banyan Asian American writers collective, and I just say that because um, I think, artists, we inspire each other, which is really great that we're in this community. And anyway, he's a musician, and we have this monthly writing workshop. And that is like the only song I've ever written. It's really, it's not easy for me to write songs. And we were in a writing session on Zoom one day, and I was like, oh, Ed would have his guitar sometime, be writing something. So I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna, have my guitar. And so, but yeah, I don't know how like the lyrics came to me, but yeah, I'm originally from Southern California, the LA area, and then I moved to Chicago 20 years ago. And I think it's just like feeling in between homes, this notion of home, but feeling not always at home or in between homes. And so, yeah, just like we say the phrase home away from home, but, looking for a home, but kind of still feeling in between. My parents are immigrants, and right, there's different, generation gaps and things like that. So, yeah, but it was nice. I have to appreciate the question, being able to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, I've been playing the guitar and, singing for a long time, since, childhood or teen years. It's only later in my middle age where I kind of, music is coming to me again. So, yeah, really appreciate being in community with these musicians, writers, artists, and storytellers.
Thank you so much, Jane. And Polly, you referred to the writers colony a couple of times, and even though this secret love of hearts has been with you forever, it seems. How like I'm trying to think of a way, because you mentioned writing the book um while you were away, but it does take you like very much back to Kansas or where you're from anyway, like your birth home. So what is it like to write those transitions, like the writing your way home, I suppose, into something that has been with you since you were a baby? Yeah.
Mm. Um, I don't know. I guess it was funny the other day, my teenager had to get their passport for a trip, and she didn't know where I was born. And I've talked about it a lot, and I had just written this poem about going to Minnesota or being born in a snowstorm in winter. And I said, that's one of the most important stories about me. And if you can't find it anywhere, it's in my book. And as I have written all these stories for you guys in a book, and I've told you in person. And I guess sometimes as we get older, we start to value those stories and we remember them more and we go over them more, we tell them more. And that's one of the things I've always done since I was a kid. I would make my dad tell me the stories of every story he could remember about his childhood that he was willing to share. And then I would go secretly around the house and collect more stories. Like I would go in the basement and get my grandfather to tell me, how did you meet grandma? And then I would go up to the kitchen. I'd say, Grandma, how did you meet grandpa? And then I would get these two diverse stories. And then nowadays I'll put them into a poem because I just find those stories still fascinating. They still really, I don't know, help me feel rooted, and they're comforting. They're fun to tell.
Thank you so much. And I love that you're leaving a legacy for your kids in your writing, because that is something that a lot of us don't get. So yeah. I want to open it up to the panel. I mean anyone really, but like especially the artists. Are there things that you would love to know about each other, or like want to ask each other about the work?
Um, I was just wondering, Michelle, like, I think the monologues are great, like, right, to listen and we're live. I may have missed it, but do you present those monologues in a different way, like in writing, or is it mostly performance or, readings?
This is a brand new world for me. I've performed it on stage once this past October.
Yeah, great.
And so when my dad died 5 years ago, right before COVID, I would say to my husband and young teens, I'm like, one day I'm going to do a TED Talk. So not really knowing how I would ever do it. So, life has its, and then my mom died suddenly 2 years after he did, 3 years after he did. And so life has a way of sometimes just, the universe has a way of sometimes giving you opportunity. And that's sort of what happened with this monologue that I presented on stage in October. And so, yeah, I'm a therapist. Like I'm an occupational therapist. This is a whole new world for me. Yeah. But I grew up in Story. I grew up in a very, very rural community in Canada, 2 hours outside of Calgary. Like my hometown is 11 people in it. But and we're still well connected to the community. But my great grandparents immigrated to Canada from Virginia, like in 1904 when Canada was giving land away. So, because they had too many sons and not enough land in Virginia, and they were giving farmland away here to increase population. So a lot of that is shared through story. So, and still story within. Like I love going back to my hometown, which is only a couple hours away, and people like, I remember the time that your dad, like, I'm like, why am I living in the city? I want to move out there again. Right. So, because story, just like Alec was saying, like that's how memories stay alive. So yeah.
Yeah, and I really appreciated hearing your mom's voice. I thought it was so distinct. That's why I think listening to it, like presented, was
Oh
great,
yeah.
right?
Thank you. She was very distinct, and she was a force of nature. There's no doubt about that. So
Sounds like.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michelle and Jane. Because Michelle, you were talking about story being like from your early childhood. I want to pose this question to anybody who would like to answer it. as TLAers, we borrow from our personal transformations and turn them into writing or monologue. I mean, monologues are writing. Sorry, I am a playwright, so I do know that. um, but what was an early moment where you discovered that the significance of writing through transformations for you?
May I?
Yes, please.
Well, I've been so blessed by so many family members. They all had their stories, and they made stories up to teach us and entertain. But my father, he caused us to think. He always dropped little seeds of opportunity to view things differently. When I was very young, I got up early in the morning because my father would get up at 5, make breakfast, and be out by 6. So one morning I caught him in the kitchen still, and I asked him, "Dad, can you make me an egg?" And he said, "Sure, mijo, come here." And he put his palm on my forehead, and he said, "Mijo, son, you are an egg." And I said, "Well, no, that's not what I mean." "Tell me what you mean." I said, "Okay, Dad, could you please cook a couple of eggs for me so I can have breakfast with you?" "That I can do." So there were all, I don't know, many, many little things like that. So one tiny thing is, Ren, I appreciated his comment about the toads. Many years ago, we would take elementary and middle school students to the mountains, and many of them had never been to the mountains, seen snow, touched snow, any of those kinds of things. And there were 2 little boys from Santa Ana, California, and we're on our nature hike. And one of the boys picked up a rock and was throwing it at something, much where this story came from today. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm trying to hit that lizard. They're just too fast." And I said, "Oh, wow. Well, do you know if it's a mommy lizard or a daddy lizard or a grandpa lizard, an uncle lizard?" He says, "Well, I don't know." He says, "Well, they do have somewhere to go just like us. We're on a hike and we got to return. They're waiting for us. That lizard's family is waiting for him or her." So the other boy had a rock in his hand, and the one I spoke to turned to him and said, "What are you doing with that rock? Put it down. Don't you know the lizards have somewhere to go?" So there are opportunities for learning and without being heavy-handed or finger pointing and say, "What's wrong with you, kid?" So that's what I wanted to share, how we learn sometimes through precious moments.
Thanks so much, Alec. Would anyone else like to share an early transformative experience you had with language or writing or doing language? I'm gonna call on someone. Mike, you go.
I'm trying to think. Significant moments with language. Well, I mean, I've always, writing has been a part of my life since I was a child, but it's always made an appearance and then would disappear, and then it would make an appearance again. So its importance kind of comes and goes, but like looking back, not having been a writer for quite some time now, or at least rather I should say, having claimed that as an identity for myself for many years now, it tends to come when during moments where I that are life altering for me. So and these are and these those moments eventually give rise to some of my more significant projects. So for instance, when I wrote my first book on suicide and creativity, that emerged during a time when I found myself navigating, straddling the line between life and death myself, and having a psychiatric hospital and an attempted suicide. And writing came, the power of writing came to me, and specifically during that time. I was in college, and I sought to make sense of my experiences, and I did that by looking at the writings of people who themselves had been in the same shoes that I was. So that was a pivotal moment in my young adult life when writing returned to me and in some ways announced its importance in my life and relevance to my life. And and then so that's one. I think that's the first real moment. I know that there are moments in my childhood and adolescence when writing did play some role, but it's really those uh life altering and it's in traumatic moments in my life that I sought to make sense of. And that's where writing, um, in some ways, became a companion, or it was like a friend that I hadn't seen in a while, and then become reacquainted with during these rough moments. So yeah, that's my response.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mike. Jane, I saw you nodding. Would you like to share something?
Thank you, Amanda. You're such a good facilitator. Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank Mike for sharing. I'm glad to know your work through this event, and I'm really interested and check out your books. And I guess Amanda's question about transformative moments in writing, I didn't mean to be too academic about it, but I saw Mike is also a professor, and I know I got a couple of my academic friends and family members on this call, and Mike was also talking about, right, kind of like storytelling and personal stories, and I just wanted to share that um, I did academic literary criticism for a long time, and then to go through my hoops, get my PhD, get tenure, and after I got tenure, I felt a little more secure to do different kinds of writing, and so I worked on a book length memoir about family history of mental illness, so some themes, and just poetry, personal essays, I guess songwriting. So it's just an interesting, I guess, journey to kind of see different places people have expression, and what kind of, containers people put things in, and communities we connect with through different kinds of work. So I just wanted to resonate a little bit, and say, Mike, your work sounds really interesting. Look forward to reading more of it.
I have read Mike's work, and it's
You
awesome.
approve? Give a shout out. Recommend, yeah.
Highly recommend.
5 stars.
Yes, 5 stars. Polly, would you like to take us home on the question on transformative moments in your life? I mean, as an editor, I'm sure I know you read tons of other people's writing, and that can be its own thing, but like for yourself as a writer, what has felt like what's a moment that felt very transformative for you?
Transformative moment from writing. Well, the most transformative, an early transformative moment I had was taking my first poetry class. Didn't think I would like poetry, and my professors asked us to write a 10-page paper, And this poem that I was supposed to write about was only 15, 20 lines. And it was about a potato that was thrown away in the trash. And it was by Jane Kenyon. And I thought, how am I going to write 10 pages about this? And the more I researched it, the more I fell in love with poetry. And I thought, I could probably write 20 pages about this poem. And it made me want to learn how to write poetry. And poetry really transformed my life. I feel like it helped me decide how I feel about things, how my relationships with my family are. That helped me decide to stay, that I wanted to stay becoming an artist, and I got my bachelor's in art. And so every time I have to make a decision, or I want to clear up the air, get my, take something that's just a sad story, a sad experience, when I come to it in poetry, somehow it transforms, and I meet past relatives, I dream about the future, and magical things start to happen. And so poetry is like a friend that I can have all the time.
That's so lovely. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that anyone would like to ask each other, or that the audience would like to ask the panel?
I just wanted to say in response to what Polly said real quick, and hopefully other people will talk, but I appreciated those lines in your poem. I forget if it's the last one about you were talking about like the role of the poet or the poet, and I appreciated hearing those lines and what the poet can do and what the poet is, because these days there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think it is still good that we have poetry and we have art and we have love because there's
Yeah.
role of the
And then,
poet that we can still, try to speak out and be creative and express, even when sometimes it's not valued as much, maybe for those louder voices.
yeah, I think of poetry as just any story poetry is just using words, playing with words and telling our stories. And yeah, thanks.
It's free.
Yeah, it's a free voice. You're born with
Anyone
it.
can do it. You don't have to pay money. Love free.
There's something about the containers that all of you work in, the writing containers, that you're especially drawn to and how that expresses whatever story you're like trying to tell.
Like I said before, I'm from very, very small town, rural community. And so part of our education out there in junior high, which is grade 7, 8, and 9, we have to do public speaking in school. And I was very shy, and I was very, very, very timid. And so I was in grade 7, and I wrote my speech was on Princess Diana. They weren't even married. They might have just been married. Anyways, not only did I win in my grade 7, but I went to it was 3 schools competition, and I won it against, like, I think even the high school kids. I won the whole competition. So the power of speaking, and I didn't want to bring my trophy to school. I didn't want the teachers to announce it. And but I think at an early age of low self-esteem and timidness, I saw the power in the spoken word, and recognized that people heard me, right? My mom was a powerhouse, like I said. I wasn't heard a lot in my home. So that was a very powerful sort of starting point. And my kids don't really do it in school anymore, and it's unfortunate. But public speaking and speaking out is such a powerful. It's been a powerful thing for different reasons over the years for me.
Thank you so much, Michele. And thank you everybody for using your voice today to share your stories. And I want to thank you as the performers, but also the audience. Thank you so much for being here. Let's give, round of applause, however you want to react, all of those things. Thank you so much. Before we close, I would love it if you could fill out a short survey that we just dropped in the chat. It's very short. Just so we know what you think about the virtual salon and, you know, things we could do, what you're taking away today. Thank you to Tracy Nichols, the TLAN coordinator, who does the registration and announcements for the event. My planning committee teammates, Ashley Barnes and Sharon Sperry, and Judy Brenneman and Ted Brenneman for getting this video up on YouTube in the future. And to all of you, if this is your first TLAN event or if you're a longtime supporter, thank you so much for being here. If you see yourself in the work or conversation that we experienced today, please consider becoming a member. Our next virtual salon will be on Sunday, June 8th at the same time. You can find all the details at the TLAN Virtual Salons page, which is just tlanetwork.org/virtual salons. Thank you, everybody, and we hope to see you at the next virtual salon.